I need you and others to make perfectly clear that Juneteenth was not a day of picnics. It was not a day of celebration. It wasn't a day of barbecues and cookouts. That for Black people in Texas, where Juneteenth was founded, it was about freedom. It was the pursuit of economic freedom. It was pursuit of the right to vote, civil rights. I said, what we cannot do is allow that Juneteenth is a national holiday, and it is the only day that actually recognizes and tied to slavery. We cannot allow this to be bastardized and prostituted and turned into a day of partying and line dancing. There has to be a freedom component that tied with it.
Well, more than that, we also need accuracy with regard to Juneteenth. That is to say, the traditional story of the men in blue showing up in Galveston and alerting these enslaved Africans to the reality that supposedly you're free, that's a misrepresentation. First of all, the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, issued by the Lincoln government, did not have any standing in Confederate Texas. Actually, what happens is that the men in blue of the U.S. Army are showing up in Galveston because the enslavers plan to extend slavery back into Mexico. Because recall, Cinco de Mayo, marked on May 5th every year, particularly by our Mexican-American brothers and sisters, the French had taken over Mexico and they were supporting the Confederates. And so the Confederates were going to make a jailbreak into Mexico, dragging, kicking, and screaming enslaved Africans alongside with them so that they could extend the life and legacy of slavery. But what happens with the men in blue showing up in Galveston, they were recruiting these Black men as the Confederacy was collapsing, and they managed to join the men in blue, and then they, along with progressive and patriotic Mexicans, helped to strangle the French-based puppet regime. And interestingly enough, the French puppet leader, Maximilian, he was assassinated, he was killed. He was subjected to the death penalty on June 19th, 1867. And that is a further reason to mark Juneteenth, because June 19th, 1867, in many ways has more resonance and more profundity than June 19th, 1865, which is part of the traditional story.
Last thing I want to do is this here, because as you were talking, you mentioned that documentary, the 6-part series out of Canada.